The year was 1404. In the lavish corridors of one of France's most powerful noble families, a boy named Gilles de Rais was born into unimaginable wealth and privilege. But this same child would grow up to become what many consider history's first documented serial killer. When Gilles was just 10 years old, his world shattered. His father was killed in a brutal hunting accident, gored to death by a wild boar. Some accounts suggest young Gilles watched it happen. His mother died shortly after, perhaps from grief, leaving him in the hands of his ruthless grandfather, Jean de Craon. The old man was cruel, ambitious, and he molded Gilles into something dark. Despite this nightmare of a childhood, Gilles became a celebrated war hero. Fighting alongside the legendary Joan of Arc during the 100 Years' War, he proved himself a fearless and brilliant military commander. His bravery was so remarkable that in 1429, at just 25 years old, he was awarded the title of Marshal of France, one of the highest honors in the entire kingdom. He was wealthy beyond measure, respected by all, and seemingly destined for greatness. Then came 1431. Joan of Arc was captured, tried for heresy, and burned alive at the stake. Gilles witnessed her execution, and something inside him broke completely. He abandoned military life and retreated to his vast estates. Publicly, he spent his fortune on extravagant theatrical productions and bizarre projects. But privately, behind the stone walls of his castles, something unspeakable was happening. Children began to vanish from nearby villages. Young boys from peasant families would disappear without a trace. Gilles had descended into madness and the occult, performing grotesque rituals in hidden chambers. His servants would lure children to the estate with promises of work or food. What happened next was too horrific to fully describe. Torture, murder, and rituals so vile that even hardened investigators would later struggle to speak of them. The bodies were burned to ash. No evidence left behind. For nearly a decade, he got away with it. His noble blood protected him from suspicion. Estimates suggest he murdered anywhere from dozens to hundreds of children. But in 1440, Gilles made one fatal mistake. During a land dispute, he kidnapped a priest. The church could not ignore such an insult. They launched an investigation, and when they started digging, the truth came pouring out like poison. Witnesses came forward, servants confessed. Mass graves were discovered at his estates. On October 26, 1440, Gilles de Rais was hanged, then burned. The monster who'd hidden behind a hero's mask was finally destroyed. But his evil didn't die with him. Centuries later, across the ocean in America, another man would take the art of murder to a whole new level. His birth name was Herman Webster Mudgett. Born in 1861 in a quiet New Hampshire town, he was intelligent, charming, and utterly devoid of empathy. At medical school in Michigan, whilst his classmates struggled through anatomy lessons, Herman spent hours alone with corpses, fascinated by death in ways that unsettled even his professors. In 1885, he simply walked away from his wife and infant child. When he reappeared in Chicago, he had a new identity: H. Holmes. The name was supposedly chosen as a tribute to Sherlock Holmes. The irony was savage. Holmes found work as a pharmacist and began his criminal career with simple cons, murdering people to steal their money and property. But he had grander ambitions. Far grander. In Chicago's Englewood neighborhood, he purchased an empty plot of land and began construction on what would become his masterpiece. To passers-by, it looked like an ordinary building. Shops on the ground floor, rental apartments above. But Holmes had designed every inch of it himself. And he'd designed it for murder. The building became known as the Murder Castle. Secret passages snaked through the walls. Staircases led to brick walls. Some rooms had no windows and doors that locked only from the outside. Holmes installed gas pipes that could silently pump poison into sealed chambers whilst victims slept. In the basement sat a massive furnace, perfect for cremating bodies. Soundproof rooms muffled screams. Trapdoors sent victims plummeting into darkness. It was a house designed by the devil himself. Then came 1893, and the World's Fair. The Chicago World's Columbian Exposition was the event of the century. Over 27 million people flooded into the city. For Holmes, it was paradise. Young women arrived daily, looking for work, accommodation, adventure. He'd advertise rooms in his building, charm them with his good looks and wit, sometimes even propose marriage. Once he had control of their money, they'd simply vanish into the murder castle's labyrinth. He sold their bodies to medical schools. He collected insurance money from policies he'd cunningly arranged. Some victims he dissected himself, keeping souvenirs. But greed was Holmes's downfall. He attempted an elaborate insurance fraud involving his associate Benjamin Peiterzel, whom he murdered, and the scheme collapsed. Arrested in Boston in 1894, Holmes eventually confessed to 27 murders, though he was prone to exaggeration. Modern historians believe the actual number was closer to 9 confirmed kills. He was tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. On May 7, 1896, H. Holmes was hanged in Philadelphia. America's first widely known serial killer was dead. But charm and intelligence weren't Holmes's alone. Another killer would soon emerge, one whose depravity would make even Holmes seem almost ordinary. Albert Fish was born in 1870, and from the very beginning his life was soaked in misery. His father died when Albert was just 5, and his mother, unable to cope, sent him to an orphanage. It was there, in that supposedly safe place, that young Albert experienced severe mistreatment. But here's the twisted part. He later claimed he enjoyed it. The pain awakened something dark inside him. His family had a history of severe mental illness. His mother hallucinated. His uncle was diagnosed with mania. One brother was sent to an asylum. The seeds of madness ran deep in his blood. As an adult, Fish seemed normal enough. He married, fathered 6 children, worked as a house painter in New York City. Neighbors thought he was a decent, quiet man. They had no idea what he was doing in private. Fish began practicing extreme self-harm, inserting needles into his own body for gratification. Then he graduated to children. He'd abduct them, harm them, end their lives, and sometimes he'd consume them. His most notorious crime came in 1928. A family named Bud had placed an advertisement looking for work for their teenage son. Fish, posing as a wealthy farmer named Frank Howard, visited their home. While there, he met their 10-year-old daughter, Grace. He charmed the family completely, even convincing them to let him take little Grace to a birthday party for his niece. Grace never came home. For 6 years, the case went cold. The Budd family lived in agonizing uncertainty. Then, in November 1934, Mrs. Budd received a letter. What she read destroyed her. Fish had written a detailed, horrifying account of how he'd taken Grace to an abandoned house, ended her life, and committed unspeakable acts over 9 days. The letter was so disturbing that even seasoned detectives struggled to read it. But Fish had made one mistake. The envelope contained a small emblem traced back to a private chauffeurs association. Detectives followed the lead and arrested him on December 13, 1934. At trial, Fish pleaded insanity, claiming God's voice commanded him to harm children. Psychiatrists testified about his countless perversions and delusions, but the jury found him sane enough to face justice. On January 16, 1936, Albert Fish was executed in the electric chair at Sing Sing prison. Some say he helped the guards strap him in, excited for the ultimate pain. Fish's letter led to his capture, but across the ocean, another killer was sending letters too, and he would never be caught. London, 1888. The Whitechapel district of the East End was a place of crushing poverty, overcrowded slums, and desperation. Women sold their bodies just to afford a bed for the night. And someone was hunting them. Between August 31st and November 9th of that year, 5 women were murdered in ways so brutal that over a century later, the crimes still shock. Their names were Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. All were prostitutes. All were slaughtered. The killer's method was precise and terrifying. He'd approach them in the dark, slash their throats so deeply they were nearly decapitated, then perform grotesque abdominal mutilations whilst they lay dying or dead. Internal organs were removed with what seemed like surgical skill. Some were taken away entirely. The final victim, Mary Kelly, was found in her rented room on November 9th. The scene was so horrific that even hardened police officers vomited. Her body had been virtually skinned. Her organs arranged around the room. Her face mutilated beyond recognition. Her lover could only identify her by her eyes. Then, the letters started arriving. One, sent to a news agency, was signed Jack the Ripper. The name stuck. Another letter arrived at a vigilance committee with half a human kidney enclosed, allegedly taken from one of the victims. Whether these letters were genuine or sick hoaxes remains debated. Despite a massive investigation by Scotland Yard, the killer was never caught. Theories have ranged from deranged doctors to royal conspirators, from butchers to barbers. Over the years, literally thousands of suspects have been named, but none proven. Jack the Ripper simply vanished. The murders stopped as suddenly as they'd begun. The case remains officially unsolved to this day, one of history's greatest and most haunting mysteries. The Ripper terrorized London for mere months, but decades later in America, another killer would emerge, one who'd taunt police for years and never be identified. Northern California, late 1960s. The summer of love was fading, and something evil was rising to take its place. On December 20th, 1968, 2 teenagers, 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and 17-year-old David Faraday, were shot to death in their car on a lonely lover's lane in Benicia. It seemed like a random act of violence. It wasn't. Over the next year, the Zodiac Killer, a name he gave himself, would strike again and again, targeting young couples in isolated locations around the San Francisco Bay Area. He used guns, knives, whatever was needed. 7 confirmed victims, 5 dead, 2 survivors. But those were only the ones authorities could prove. What made the Zodiac truly terrifying wasn't just the murders, it was his desire for attention. He sent letters to local newspapers, taking credit for the killings, describing details only the killer could know, and threatening to bomb schools and murder children if his letters weren't published on the front page. His letters began the same way. "This is the Zodiac speaking." They were signed with a symbol resembling crosshairs from a gun sight, and they contained cryptograms, complex coded messages filled with mysterious symbols. One cipher was cracked within days. It read, in part, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." Another wouldn't be decoded for over 50 years, finally solved in 2020 by amateur codebreakers. 2 ciphers remain unsolved to this day. The Zodiac claimed to have killed 37 people, though this was likely exaggeration. His last confirmed letter arrived in 1974. Then silence. He simply stopped. Despite one of the most intensive investigations in California history, despite over 2,500 suspects being examined, the Zodiac was never caught. The only person publicly named by police, a man named Arthur Lee Allen, died in 1992 without ever being charged. The case remains open. Somewhere, the Zodiac Killer's identity is still a mystery. He might even still be alive. Whilst America hunted the Zodiac across the world in Soviet Russia, another monster was operating in the shadows. One who made the Zodiac's body count look tiny. Andrei Chikatilo was born in 1936 in rural Ukraine during one of the darkest chapters in Soviet history. Stalin's forced collectivization had created a catastrophic famine. Millions starved. And throughout Andrei's childhood, his mother told him a horrifying story, that before he was born, she'd had another son named Stepan, who was taken by starving neighbors. Whether the story was true or not, it haunted Andrei forever. His childhood was harsh. His father was captured during World War II and branded a coward. Andrei was weak, shy, bullied mercilessly. He developed deep insecurities and disturbing thoughts. As an adult, he became a schoolteacher. He married, had children, appeared completely normal. But complaints about inappropriate behavior with students forced him to move from school to school, eventually landing at a mining college near Rostov. And in 1978, he committed his first crime. 9-year-old Lena Zakotnova. He lured her to an abandoned house. What happened next was driven by rage. He became obsessed. For 12 years, Chikatilo continued. He'd prowl train stations and bus stops looking for runaways, vulnerable people, vulnerable children. He'd lure them to forests with promises of food or money. Then he'd attack, harming his victims. He claimed that only during these acts could he feel something. The Soviet authorities tried to cover up the incidents. Serial offenders weren't supposed to exist in their perfect socialist society. But evidence kept appearing. At least 52 confirmed victims, though the true number is likely higher. In 1984, police actually caught him behaving inappropriately with a girl at a train station. They tested his blood, but a rare medical condition caused a mismatch with the evidence. He was released. He committed 8 more crimes before finally being caught again in 1990. At trial, he was kept in an iron cage in the courtroom. He ranted, behaved erratically, at one point acting inappropriately toward the judge. He was convicted of 52 offenses and sentenced to death. On February 14, 1994, Valentine's Day, Andrei Chikatilo was executed in a Moscow prison. Chikatilo operated in forests and railway stations. But in America, one criminal was building something far more elaborate, a facility of horrors on wheels. David Parker Ray was born in 1939 in New Mexico. His childhood was a nightmare. His grandfather subjected him to harsh punishments. His father exposed him to violent pornography. As an adult, Ray worked as a mechanic for the State Parks Department. To everyone around him, he was just a skilled handyman. Quiet, unremarkable. But Ray had a project, a secret project that consumed him. He bought a cargo trailer and spent years converting it into what he called his toy box. He soundproofed the walls, installed a gynecological examination table with restraints, filled it with whips, chains, clamps, surgical instruments, pulleys, mirrors mounted on the ceiling. He allegedly spent over $100,000 perfecting it. This wasn't just a murder room. This was a purpose-built torture chamber designed to keep victims alive and suffering for as long as possible. Ray would kidnap women, often with help from accomplices, including his girlfriend Cindy Hendy and possibly even his daughter. He'd drug them, transport them to the trailer parked behind his house in the New Mexico desert, and lock them inside. When they woke up, the first thing they'd hear was a tape recording. Ray's voice, calm and methodical, explaining in graphic detail exactly what was going to happen to them. He referred to himself only as Master. The tape lasted 17 minutes. Victims said it was more terrifying than the torture itself. He'd keep them for days, sometimes weeks. Sexual torture, experiments. When he was finished, he'd drug them again with substances that caused memory loss, then dump them, hoping they'd remember nothing. Ray claimed he'd been doing this for 40 years. He estimated 60 victims, though no bodies were ever found. He told one accomplice that he'd fill their chest cavities with cement and sink them in nearby Elephant Butte Lake. On March 22, 1999, a 22-year-old woman named Cynthia Vigil managed the impossible. She escaped. After 3 days of hell, she freed herself from her chains, stabbed Hendy with an ice pick, and fled naked into the street, a metal collar still around her neck. Her bravery led to Ray's arrest. He was convicted of kidnapping and torture and sentenced to 224 years in prison. But he never faced full justice. On May 28, 2002, just 2 years into his sentence, David Parker Ray died of a heart attack. His secrets died with him. Ray built his chamber in secret. But in Illinois, another killer was hiding in plain sight, behind a clown's painted smile. John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago in 1942 to an abusive alcoholic father who beat him and told him he was worthless. Despite this, Gacy desperately sought approval and respectability. As an adult, he became a successful businessman, active in local Democratic politics, volunteering for community events. He was married with children, and he had a special talent. He'd dress up as Pogo the Clown and entertain at children's birthday parties and charity events. The community loved him. They had no idea what he was doing in the crawl space beneath his house. Between 1972 and 1978, Gacy assaulted and ended the lives of at least 33 young men and boys. His method was chillingly consistent. He'd lure victims to his home with promises of construction work or simply by using his charm. Once inside, he'd trick them into putting on handcuffs. "Let me show you a magic trick." Then he'd overpower them. He'd assault and harm them for hours, sometimes days. Then he'd end their lives, often whilst assaulting them. And then came disposal. 26 bodies were buried in the crawl space beneath his house. 3 more elsewhere on his property. 4 were dumped in the Des Plaines River when he ran out of room. The smell from his house was overwhelming. Neighbors complained for years. Gacy explained it away as moisture problems or dead rats. People believed him because he was Pogo the Clown. He was a good man. In December 1978, 15-year-old Robert Peace disappeared after telling his mother he was going to see Gacy about a job. This time, police didn't let it go. They investigated. They obtained a warrant. And when they searched Gacy's house, they found hell on earth. 29 bodies in the crawl space. The stench was unimaginable. Some victims were so decayed they could only be identified through dental records. Gacy was convicted of all 33 offenses in 1980 and sentenced to death. He spent 14 years on death row, during which he painted, mostly pictures of clowns, which sold for thousands of dollars. On May 10, 1994, John Wayne Gacy was executed by lethal injection. His last words were reportedly, "Kiss my ass." Gacy performed for children by day and committed crimes by night. But in Kansas, another killer was living an even more perfectly constructed double life. Dennis Rader was born in 1945 in Kansas. By every outward measure, he was the model citizen. He married his college sweetheart, had 2 children, worked as a compliance officer for Park City, and was deeply involved in his Lutheran church, even serving as congregation president. He was a Cub Scout leader, a devoted family man, and for 17 years he was also BTK, bind, torture, kill. On January 15, 1974, Rader committed his first murders. He cut the phone lines to the Otero family home, entered, and systematically strangled 4 family members, the parents and 2 children. The 11-year-old daughter, Josephine, he hung from a pipe in the basement. Between 1974 and 1991, he murdered at least 10 people in the Wichita area. His method was consistent. Break in, bind the victims with materials from their own homes, torture them, and strangle them. Sometimes with his hands, sometimes with ligatures, always slow. But Rader didn't just want to kill. He craved recognition. In October 1974, he sent his first letter to the press, directing them to a textbook in the public library where he'd hidden a detailed confession. The letter ended. "The code words for me will be, bind them, torture them, kill them, BTK. The name stuck. BTK. For years, he sent taunting letters describing his crimes, his fantasies, even sending items taken from victims. Then, in 1991, he simply stopped, went quiet. The case went cold. 14 years passed. People began to think BTK was dead or imprisoned for something else. Then, in January 2004, as the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders approached, BTK couldn't help himself. His narcissism demanded attention. He started sending letters again. Police engaged him, even placing classified ads to communicate. Rader asked if a floppy disk could be traced if he sent one. Police lied, saying no. So he sent them a disk. Big mistake. The metadata on the disk contained the name Dennis and a link to Christ Lutheran Church. Police checked the church computer, and there was Dennis Rader, congregation president. They arrested him in February 2005. DNA confirmed his identity. He confessed to everything, showing no remorse, only pride in his cleverness. Rader was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole. He's still alive today, sitting in a Kansas prison, his perfect double life finally shattered. Rader craved attention and control. But in England, another killer was operating with a different kind of power, the trust of his patients. Harold Shipman was born in 1946 in Nottingham, England. His childhood was fairly ordinary, except for one traumatic event. When he was 17, his beloved mother died of lung cancer. In her final days, Shipman watched doctors ease her suffering with morphine injections. That image stayed with him. He went to medical school, became a GP, and eventually set up practice in Hyde, Greater Manchester. By the 1990s, Dr. Shipman was beloved. Patients described getting on his list as like winning the lottery. He was kind, made house calls, truly seemed to care, and he was killing them. Between 1975 and 1998, Harold Shipman murdered approximately 250 of his patients, though the true number might be even higher. He is considered one of the most prolific serial killers in recorded history. His method was simple and nearly undetectable. He'd visit elderly patients at home, inject them with lethal doses of diamorphine, medical-grade heroin, then falsify their medical records and death certificates. Because he was a doctor, no one questioned him. Death seemed natural, expected even, given their age. But why? Why would a trusted physician murder his patients? Theories vary. Some believe he had a god complex, a need to control who lived and died. Others suggest his mother's death created a twisted association between death, morphine, and mercy. He rarely stole from victims, so money wasn't the primary motive. The truth died with him. His downfall came from pure arrogance. In June 1998, he murdered Kathleen Grundy, an 81-year-old former mayoress. Then he forged her will using an old typewriter, leaving her entire £386,000 estate to himself. Mrs. Grundy's daughter was a solicitor. She knew something was wrong. She pushed for an investigation. When Grundy's body was exhumed, it contained lethal levels of morphine. Police investigated further. The pattern emerged, body after body exhumed, all showing signs of morphine overdose. On January 31, 2000, Shipman was convicted of 15 murders, though investigators later linked him to at least 215 deaths, with another 45 strongly suspected. He was sentenced to life imprisonment. But Shipman would never face full accountability. On January 13, 2004, one day before his 58th birthday, he hanged himself in his prison cell using bedsheets. Shipman used medicine to kill. But across the Atlantic, America's most infamous serial killer was using something far more dangerous: his charm. Theodore Robert Bundy was born in 1946 under a cloud of shame. His young mother, unmarried, gave birth to him in a home for unwed mothers. For the first years of his life, Ted believed his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his older sister. When he eventually discovered the truth, something inside him broke. But outwardly, Bundy seemed golden. He was handsome, intelligent, charismatic. He studied psychology at university, attended law school, worked on political campaigns for the Republican Party. He had everything going for him, except he enjoyed killing women. Between 1974 and 1978, Ted Bundy murdered at least 30 young women across 7 states: Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, Idaho, California, and Florida. The true number is likely much higher. Bundy himself hinted at over 100 victims. His method was chillingly calculated. He'd approach young women in public, often on college campuses, and pretend to be injured, wearing a fake cast or using crutches. He'd ask for help carrying books to his car. Once they were close enough, he'd overpower them. What happened next was unspeakable. He'd drive them to remote locations, rape them, murder them, often by bludgeoning or strangulation, then dump their bodies. But Bundy didn't stop there. He'd return to the corpses repeatedly, sometimes for weeks, to have sex with them until decomposition made it impossible. Police began connecting the disappearances. In 1975, Bundy was arrested in Utah during a traffic stop when officers found burglary tools in his car. They linked him to kidnapping. He was convicted and imprisoned. But in June 1977, he escaped from a courthouse law library by jumping out of a second-story window. Recaptured, he escaped again 6 months later by cutting a hole in his cell ceiling. He fled to Florida and went on a final rampage. On January 15, 1978, he broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University and savagely attacked 4 women in their beds, killing 2. Weeks later, he abducted and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. He was finally captured after a traffic stop and sentenced to death for multiple murders. For years, he delayed execution by confessing to more killings, trying to trade information for his life. It didn't work. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy was executed in Florida's electric chair. Outside the prison, crowds cheered and set off fireworks. Bundy's execution made headlines worldwide. But whilst America celebrated, in South America, a killer even more prolific was just getting started. Pedro Alonso Lopez was born in 1948 in Colombia, the 7th of 13 children. His childhood was a catalogue of horrors. At age 8, his mother kicked him out of the house. He was 8 years old, alone on the streets. He survived by begging and stealing. At 12, an American family took him in and enrolled him in a school for orphans. But when he was mistreated there, he ran away again. At 18, he was arrested for car theft and sent to prison. There, he was victimized by other inmates. Lopez later claimed he defended himself violently against them. He was never charged. Authorities apparently didn't care what happened to prisoners. When he was released, something in Lopez had transformed into pure evil. Between the 1970s and 1980, Pedro Lopez became possibly the most prolific serial offender in recorded history. He claimed responsibility for crimes across 3 countries: Colombia, Peru, and Ecuador. He'd prowl busy marketplaces, looking for vulnerable targets. He'd lure them away with small gifts or promises of work, then commit terrible acts in remote locations. Lopez later told investigators his twisted justifications for his actions, claiming he believed he was somehow helping his victims. In 1980, in Ecuador, Lopez attempted an abduction in broad daylight. A group of indigenous people witnessed it, caught him, and prepared to take justice into their own hands. A female missionary intervened and convinced them to hand him over to police. At first, Lopez denied everything. Then, inexplicably, he confessed. In detail. He led authorities to multiple grave sites. The evidence confirmed his stories. He was convicted of numerous crimes in Ecuador and sentenced to just 16 years. The maximum sentence Ecuadorian law allowed at the time. And here's the horrifying part. In 1994, after serving only 14 years, Pedro Lopez was released for good behavior. He was deported to Colombia, briefly held in a psychiatric facility, then declared sane and released in 1998. In 2002, an Interpol warrant was issued for his arrest on new charges, but Lopez had vanished. To this day, his whereabouts are unknown. The monster of the Andes could still be alive and free somewhere. Whilst Lopez disappeared into the shadows, in 1970s New York, another criminal was terrorizing an entire city. David Berkowitz was born in Brooklyn, New York on June 1, 1953. He was given up for adoption at birth and raised by Nathan and Pearl Berkowitz in the Bronx. When his adoptive mother died of cancer in 1967, 14-year-old David was devastated. He became increasingly isolated and angry. In 1971, he joined the army and served 3 years, earning recognition as an excellent marksman. After his discharge, he returned to New York, worked for the Postal Service, and lived alone in a Yonkers apartment. And in his isolation, something dark began to grow. On July 29, 1976, David Berkowitz shot 2 young women sitting in a parked car in the Bronx. One died. It was the beginning of a reign of terror that would grip New York City for over a year. Armed with a .44 caliber Bulldog revolver, Berkowitz prowled the streets at night, targeting young women and couples in parked cars. He'd approach silently, aim through the window, and fire. 6 people were killed, 11 others wounded. The attack seemed random, unpredictable. No one was safe. The media dubbed him the .44 caliber killer. Then the letters started arriving. At one crime scene, police found a handwritten note. "I am a monster. I am the son of Sam." He sent letters to police and to journalist Jimmy Breslin, taunting them, promising more killings, signing them Son of Sam. Later, Berkowitz would claim his neighbor's dog, named Sam, was possessed by a demon that commanded him to kill. Whether he truly believed this or invented it to appear insane remains unclear. New York City descended into panic. Women cut and dyed their hair to avoid fitting the profile of long, dark hair he seemed to prefer. Nightclubs emptied. Couples stopped parking in secluded areas. The city lived in fear. Police launched one of the biggest manhunts in NYPD history, Operation Omega, with over 300 detectives working the case. Then came a break. At the scene of his final shooting, a woman reported seeing a police officer writing a parking ticket near a suspicious car. Detectives tracked down the ticket. It was issued to David Berkowitz of Yonkers. On August 10, 1977, police surrounded Berkowitz's car as he sat inside it near his apartment. When officers approached, he smiled and allegedly said, "Well, you got me." He confessed to everything, pleaded guilty to all charges, was sentenced to 6 consecutive 25-year-to-life terms. David Berkowitz is still alive today, incarcerated in New York. He's been denied parole 12 times. He claims to have found religion and refers to himself as the Son of Hope. Berkowitz heard voices, but in Milwaukee, another killer's appetites were far more literal. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His early childhood seemed normal, but there were warning signs. His father was often absent. His mother was mentally unstable and attempted suicide. Young Jeffrey became increasingly withdrawn. As a boy, he developed a fascination with dead animals. He'd collect roadkill and dissect them in the woods behind his house, studying their insides with disturbing intensity. His father, a chemist, thought it was scientific curiosity. It wasn't. In 1978, when Jeffrey was 18, he committed his first murder. He picked up a hitchhiker named Stephen Hicks, brought him home whilst his parents were away, then bludgeoned him to death with a dumbbell when Hicks tried to leave. Dahmer dismembered the body and scattered the remains in the woods. It would be 9 years before he killed again. Between 1987 and 1991, Jeffrey Dahmer murdered 17 young men, most from Milwaukee's gay community. His method became sickeningly routine. He'd meet victims at gay bars or malls, lure them to his apartment with promises of money or alcohol, drug them, then strangle them to death. But murder was just the beginning. Dahmer would have sex with the corpses. He'd photograph them in various poses. He'd dismember the bodies, keeping skulls and other parts as trophies. He'd store body parts in his refrigerator, and sometimes he'd cook and eat their flesh. He told investigators he consumed victims to make them part of him forever. Dahmer also conducted horrific experiments, attempting to create living zombies he could control. He'd drill holes into unconscious victims' skulls and inject hydrochloric acid or boiling water directly into their brains. Most died immediately. One victim, Konorak Synthesomphone, actually escaped and was found naked and incoherent on the street by two women who called police. When police arrived, Dahmer convinced them the 14-year-old boy was his 19-year-old boyfriend, and they'd just had a drunken argument. Police escorted the boy back to Dahmer's apartment, where he was murdered, dismembered, and cannibalized within hours. On July the 22nd, 1991, Dahmer's luck finally ran out. Tracy Edwards escaped from his apartment with a handcuff still dangling from his wrist and flagged down a police car. When officers entered apartment 213, they found hell. Severed heads in the refrigerator, photographs of dismembered bodies, a 57-gallon drum containing 3 torsos dissolving in acid, skulls painted and kept as keepsakes, 74 Polaroids documenting the entire process of murder and dismemberment. The Milwaukee cannibal had been caught. Dahmer was tried in 1992, found sane, and sentenced to 15 consecutive life terms, a total of 957 years in prison. But on November 28, 1994, whilst cleaning a prison bathroom, Jeffrey Dahmer was beaten to death by a fellow inmate named Christopher Scarver, who claimed God told him to do it. Dahmer's crimes shocked the world. But whilst Milwaukee was still reeling, California was about to meet a killer who worshipped the devil himself. Richard Ramirez was born on February 29, 1960, in El Paso, Texas, the youngest of 5 children. His childhood was soaked in violence. His father was abusive. But worse was his cousin Miguel, a Vietnam War veteran who showed 12-year-old Richard photographs of Vietnamese women he'd assaulted and harmed during the war. Richard was fascinated. At 13, Richard watched his cousin end his own wife's life in an argument, shooting her in the face. Instead of being traumatized, Richard seemed energized by it. He dropped out of school in 9th grade, moved to California, developed a substance addiction, and became obsessed with dark beliefs and the occult. He believed dark forces gave him power. Between April 1984 and August 1985, Richard Ramirez became the Night Stalker, one of California's most terrifying serial offenders. His crimes were chaotic and harsh. He'd break into homes at night through unlocked doors or windows. His victims ranged from children to elderly people. He had no type, no pattern. He'd use whatever weapon was available: guns, knives, hammers, even his bare hands. He'd shoot sleeping victims in the head. He'd beat them with lamps or tire irons. He'd assault women whilst their ended husbands lay beside them. He'd force victims to swear on dark powers during assaults. He'd leave pentagrams drawn at crime scenes, symbols of his devotion to darkness. At least 14 people lost their lives. Countless others assaulted, beaten, traumatized. Southern California lived in absolute terror. People installed new locks, bought guns, slept with lights on. The randomness made it worse. Anyone could be next. Then on August 30th, 1985, police released Ramirez's name and photograph to the public. The next day, he was recognized in East Los Angeles whilst trying to steal a car. Residents chased him down, beat him, and held him until police arrived. At his first court appearance, Ramirez raised his hand, revealing a pentagram drawn on his palm, and shouted, "Hail to darkness!" His trial was a circus. He showed no remorse, often smiling and laughing. Female groupies attended, declaring their love for him. In September 1989, he was convicted of 13 cases. 5 attempted cases, 11 assaults, and 14 burglaries. He was sentenced to death 19 times over, but Ramirez never faced execution. On June 7, 2013, while still on death row, he died of complications from cancer. He was 53 years old.